Live straight away. Oh, here we are. Hey guys, I hope you are well. You are back on the Talkwards. My name's Nat Rich, and we are hosting this evening live from Yorkshire. And I have two very special people with me. You'll see why by the end of this. You'll be like, ah, I get it. Tonight's show is about sacred death. And I wanted to do this because the transformative power of death is so important, but it's not discussed often enough from where I'm standing. And I feel that it's a subject that if we thoroughly understood and we allowed for a little bit more depth, we'd be able to see it in a different way. We'd be able to process it differently. We'd be able to apply the wisdom of death in so many areas of our lives. And at the moment, that it's kind of a hidden wisdom. So I've got these two on to come and talk about it. So if you're watching it live and you want to make any comments, please do so. Be nice, be kind, and I will read them out as and when I can. If you're watching this afterwards, you can also still make comments and I'll get back to you afterwards. And for anybody that is watching this, oh, that's a good point, actually. I haven't put my banner on. Let me chuck this one in. So I'm going to do this one. Show is powered by Waterbear. And Waterbear is a college in Brighton, fantastic music college. And this is going to be shared with them as well for afterwards. So joining me this evening is, first of all, we've got Chris Connors, who's a dear friend of mine from Ibiza, well, from Ireland, but we met in Ibiza. How are you, Chris?
I'm pretty good. Nice to see you here, Matt.
Yay. Loving that you said yes to me. I really liked the idea of doing this with you, and I didn't want to do it without you. So if you'd have said no, it wouldn't have been today.
Well, you definitely, I was definitely taken by your title and everything about it. It deeply resonates with me.
Amazing. Thank you. So we've also got Gerald as well. And Gerald, I met just a few weeks ago, actually. We were both on a live training course, not live training course, but live training call for an Insight timer training. So we could learn to go live on that platform. And it was 6:30 in the morning in the UK, 7:30 in the morning in Berlin. And we hit it off on a Sunday morning, and here we are now, and he's accepted gracefully to come on and join us. So how are you, Gerald?
I'm fine, thanks. Looking forward to talking to you.
Good. We're going to have a good conversation around death, and an uplifting one, I feel, as well. So I'm going to ask you both a little bit just to share with the audience what you do and what your background is. And as you will notice, guys, their voices can be very relaxing. So just sit back, relax, and absorb the wisdom from these two, because it really makes me my heart warm that they've come on and said yes together. So, and they don't know each other. So I'm putting them in the spotlight here, which I love. So Chris, I'll start with you. What is your background for the audience, if you can go into that, and kind of your understanding of death in a synopsis, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into it afterwards.
Wow. Okay, that's a good subject. Well, essentially, I've been working in the field of meditation for 20 years now. Trained probably 96, 97, 98. And at that time, it was between the Far East and America. And I suppose the being deeply immersed in the world of meditation, I also wanted to bring it out to the world as much as I could, and have been working throughout the years to find ways to do that. Alongside my time in meditation, I've also been working in design architecture and looking at design processes. So I've been merging those worlds, and more recently have created a little world called OPO, which is bringing the worlds of art, science, technology into the mind, body, soul realm, and creating apps and spaces and immersive spaces. And really my dream is to bring sacred spaces back to the city, and sacred space back to people in everyday life to use. So I guess, my dream is that, and in this topic around death, for me, it is also just part of the sacred realm. And so I could go into it, which I'm sure we will, but I am completely and utterly dedicated to all parts of life being sacred, and dying process as much as any other. So that's really why I'm here. And I'm also a celebrant, so I've worked through many different ritual ceremonies, from weddings and in funerals and in celebrations of people's lives. And so that context has always brought me through. And then just maybe the third part is my own personal experience with death. I grew up in Belfast, so I've seen a lot and been witness to a lot of death in really unfortunate circumstances, which then brought me to kind of move through my world. And I trained as a psychotherapist to move through kind of grief and grief formulas. I lost my mother at 25 and she died in my arms. And then more recently dedicated my life in my 47th year to the passing of my father, and seeing him through his passage into the next realm. And so a lot of insights of in and around death. And I find it a fascinating, beautiful conversation to have. So
amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And we are going to go deep into the exploration of death. And you have a wealth of experience. And I was there in Ibiza when we kind of did a little celebration out on the boats in the middle of the sea around after your dad died. And just such a beautiful process to see you go through and handle it with such grace. It was an honor to see, and that's why I thought you'd be perfect for this subject. And I just enjoy watching you do what you do, and I think it's valid. And this is exactly why I've got this platform, is to share people like yourself, and I say quite often about humanity, I've got such a faith in humanity, and people question me on that. And I've said, if you knew the people I knew, you'd see why that is, and you're one of them. So thank you so much. No problem. So Gerald, I would love to know even more about you than I already do, which is not much because it's a new friendship. But if you can explain a little bit about what you do for the audience, and then also your kind of connection to death, and kind of why you said yes to this, other than me asking you.
Well, it's death is a central part of Buddhism. Because Buddhism says everything is impermanent. There's nothing you can hold on to. There's nothing you can plan. Everything is dissolving continually. This means that we're always on the brink of dying. We never know when we're going to die. We do know that we're going to die, but not when. And therefore, the whole preparation in Tibetan Buddhism is you prepare your body and your mind for dying and for going through these processes. And this is what Chris is saying. This is a very sacred process. The sacredness is life and it's death at the same time. And there's a transience between the two. You move between the two, but everything is holy. And then some 15 years ago, I was... 30 years ago, I met the love of my life, and she died 15 years ago, and I looked after her for the last year. And the last 2.5 months, she was in our flat. And, all sorts of strange people came. Lamas turned up to give her a pova so that she would already leave while she's still alive, so that she could move on to the next realm. And she dedicated everything that she did, all her practice, she dedicated to other people. She gave away all her things so that when she really did come down to finally die, then, she was totally light and she was optimistic and whatever, as long as you can be optimistic. It was an amazing time because at the same time you saw her body deteriorating and you saw other parts growing into it. You saw all the tubes being stuck in and everything. It was a very dramatic thing. And because I looked after her so intensely, I couldn't continue with my old profession, which was public relations, which is saying, whatever you see is very beautiful. But somehow I didn't feel that the people really understood what love is all about. And the love that you can share a love in life and that you can share a love when somebody passes on is a really amazing experience. And so I dropped out, I suppose you could say. And I moved to India for 5.5 years and to Nepal for 2.5 years. And in Nepal, I lived in a Buddhist center and I was asked to do meditation there. And the last half year, I was even asked to teach the Buddhism there because there was no teacher. And in this time, I really had the job of all the experiences that I had in my life, I was to pass them on. You think meditation is a technique? Well, that's one part of it, maybe, but meditation has more to do with opening your heart. And if you've been through death and dying and have something to do with people, your heart is really open. And I think this is the most important thing that you can possibly say. You don't have to die to open your heart. Man, get going. You don't know how much longer you've got to live. So do it now. Open your heart now. Now's the only moment you can love. So If that is true, do it. And then you will find that death loses all its possible gravity or the problems that are involved with it. I mean, say grief always turns up. Grief is the flip side of love, always. And the deeper the love was, the deeper the grief will be. And you can't control the grief, so you go through it. But you find that with the time, once you understand that grief and compassion can go together, that's the moment that you really say, it's a wonderful life that we're living, and we're so privileged, and you can see the beauty in every moment. It's wonderful.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah. May I ask a question to you, Nat?
Yes, go for it.
Well, I hear you had a very dramatic event in your life, and you were bedridden for many months. And isn't this like dying as well, because you're cut off from all your normal things? Did you feel that it had something to do with that?
Yeah, and it's I'm really glad you brought that up. And it was something that I didn't realize, that I thought I was living a life in Ibiza when I lived there. And I really wasn't, but I didn't know at the time. I was very much enjoying myself, meeting people like Chris and having a great time. But when I did have the problem with my back and I went back to the UK and I was laid in bed, I had a very quick realization that those that really do care, that, you know, will show up very, very quickly for you. And those that don't, it kind of gives you this thing of like seeing where everyone is in your life, which was quite a kind of experience. I was like, oh, and I laid there and I realized that, really, to be honest, I was actually in the right place at the right time, and everything that was happening for me was exactly as it was meant to happen. And I'd gone through this experience because I was meant to. So I kind of accepted it very, very quickly. I had a few tears for like an afternoon, I remember. And then I laid there and I was just like, well, now what? You know, like I can't go back to Ibiza. The doctor's saying you're not going anywhere. I thought I was going to be in bed for like 4 weeks and do some Pilates, and off I'd go again with a brand new back. And it was, no, like I'm still living in the UK now. And that was like 3 years ago. But it really woke me up to the realization. And, you know, I look now with lockdown and everyone's like, oh my God, you know, we're in lockdown. I was in bed for 6 months on my own when the whole world was doing their thing and going out. And I was really on my own. And, you know, occasionally I'd have a few friends, but that taught me so much patience, and it taught me an understanding that world still goes on. I got everything I needed. I had a roof over my head. I had a friend support me with where I was staying. All the basics were met. And I realized that it's only my need for wanting more is my, you know, where I get most of my pain from, where I want it to be different than what it is. And I accepted it. And I was just like, oh, okay, this is what it's about. And it was a really humbling experience. So I actually really enjoyed it. I think I might have laid it on a bit thick, actually. I might have been in there longer than I probably needed to be, but I was really enjoying the process. And I was learning so much. And it's something you said then about the feeling of love and grief. And I was on a retreat very early in November. And I basically had a chat with one of the guys that was running the retreat, and I'm studying like the ancient principles of natural law at the moment. So it's not common law or anything. It's natural law. It's the sovereignty of the truth, the absolute truth. And the guy said to me, one of the guys in the retreat was talking about the opposite of love being fear. And the guy who was running the retreat said, it's not fear. He said, we don't fear fear. It's not fear. The illusion is that love, and the opposite is fear. He says the opposite to love is grief. And the job that we have here in the planet is to become okay with perpetual overwhelm of love or grief. Because then if we're happy with this perpetual overwhelm in love or grief, we're living to the full capacity of our emotions, whether it's this way or this way. It's not about balance. It's never been about balance. It's becoming okay with the emotions in whatever way they take, you know, whatever way they go. And he said, but you're not here to fear. And it just, when he said it, and I was just like, oh, and it sank so deep into me. And I was just like, wow. And it really, you know, I felt it in every part of my being. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm already at home from the retreat, and I'm at my mum and dad's house where I am now. And I was in the kitchen and I was thinking about something, and this feeling came over me, and I dropped to my knees. And because I was saying to myself, I was like, have I got to get used to this rejection? Because it wasn't that I was going through rejection, but I was thinking, what is it that I'm missing something? Is it do I need to get used to rejection? Is it because I'm on my own? What is it? And this voice popped into my head and said, you've done rejection. You've got like the hood and, the t-shirt and the hoodie of rejection. You're not scared of rejection. You're scared of a deeper level of love than you've already been in. So when you can handle that, that's when it'll come. And I was like, oh, and I dropped to the floor and I was overcome with this feeling of love that I have never, the depth of which that went to. It was a happy drop to the floor, but it shook me to my knees. And I cried and I was on the floor for about an hour and a half. And I was just like, oh my God. And I'd never dipped into that level within myself before. And that was still very recently. And I've done work and meditations and all sorts of stuff. And it showed me that my willingness, because I understood that it was about grief, the depth of grief and the depth of love. And because I was willing to go there, that gate had opened within me and I went there and, on my own. And I was like, oh God. And it was so refreshing. And there was nothing to fear, but it was, I really valued the seeing that how far I wasn't really prepared to go before, even though I thought I was, and I thought I was on my spiritual path. It was my own arrogance and my own protection of my ego, not taking me into those spaces, that taught me an even greater depth. And this is one of the reasons why doing this show is so important, because I am very grateful that I've got both my parents here and I haven't been through that major loss. When I was younger, I lost one of my best friends, but later on in life, I see it happening so much in the world right now. And I wanted to bring a different understanding to it, because I now feel like I understand that there is a different understanding and this kind of sacredness around it that's so important. So yes, I understand it. And that's kind of my dip in the toe, should we say it, with love and grief. And I also had a letting go process of grief as well, which was also, I like you said, with the Buddhas. I was in the bath and I was like, I'm ready to let go. And I went through everyone in my life and emotionally allowed my body to cry as if I'd lost them and that I was at their funeral. And I went through this, and it was the deepest bath that I've ever been in. But it was such a refreshing feeling because I was allowing myself to step into those places. So yeah, very deep indeed. But thank you for asking me that question.
Well, I would say the key for me is surrender.
Yeah,
you surrendered to whatever was, and you're spending this long time on the floor. I must say, it sounds like a moment of enlightenment, and I'm very happy. I think our whole life is we have all sorts of enlightenment experiences, but that definitely sounds like one, because of the freedom that come with it, and it was embedded in love. And I think this is truly wonderful. So, thank you so much for sharing that, because that is something so personal. Oh, you're really wonderful, Nat.
there's nothing off the cards. I'll talk about everything. Yeah, it's good.
Surrendering is a huge part of the dying process, of any form of dying. I think, as Gerald was saying, death comes in many forms, many moments, many places. It's something to consistently welcome into your life in order for it to enrich and grow. And And any form of surrender, I believe, really involves some form of death in it.
Yeah.
So some form.
Whether it's the ego or the thought.
It's a very overused term in the spiritual domain, saying just let go, and let go is really let die, and let die is probably a stronger way. Actually, probably maybe a more truthful way, and to just let.
I was going to say truthful.
Quite often. I remember many early years, being at a workshop in New York, and a woman saying, just let go to this woman. And the woman turned around and says, I don't know how to let go. I don't know what let go is. I don't know what to let go of. And for me, I could see it was her holding on to not really find her way to surrender to whatever it was that she was with. So yeah, inviting death in is such a wonderful, even practical tool in daily life.
Very much so. There was a show that I watched, actually I always go to the bath at 9 o'clock. It's like my me time ritual. It's because I don't have kids or a family in that sense, so I could get to do these things. So I was in the bath last night and I was listening to a YouTube show, and there was a one with Laura Eisenhower, she's a great woman actually from the States, and she had a guest on, and he was talking about the Defying the Aging process. And he was saying that there are patents out there for, and there's Nobel Peace Prize winners that have won the Peace Prize because they've understood that we do not actually have to die of old age. And they've now termed it in the scientific world that old age is a disease. So it's not actually something you have to go through, but they're keeping the information of what that is and how you can avoid that process from us. So it was very interesting to see it from a scientific point of view, and that being changed in terms of the terminology. Right. And I was sat there thinking to myself, I joke when people say, how old are you? And I always say my molecules are listening, because I understand the Dr. Masaru Emoto work with the power of emotions and words. And I always say I'm 26 for life, and my molecules are listening, and that's what it's going to stay. And since I've been saying it to myself, I really do feel much younger. And it's not because I'm trying not to get old. It's because I enjoy the feeling that it gives me when I say it, and I get little goosebumps, and I stick with that. And I really don't mind, as I'm getting older, that I'm staying younger, because I still feel very young. But I find a lot of women, and it's not just women, men as well, but a lot of women are terrified of getting older. They're terrified of that because of the death of their looks, maybe, or the death of their life in some way. And I feel it doesn't have to be that way. I feel because you grow old and you're more graceful in many ways. But if you're fearing your whole life of getting older, that's your resistance to what is. And that's a really hard place to live. It's a really deep place as well.
You were nodding so intensely, Chris, that I thought you've got something to say.
I did as well. I was like, he's going to say something.
Only that, I suppose the question is often, is our fascination with youth, an avoidance of our kind of the grace of our elder life, or is our fascination with youth a sort of a brilliant way of hacking our life system to kind of stay young forever? And I suppose what I mean by that, we could all say that age is a number, which is partly true. I have many friends in their 70s. Who have teenage spirits, and I have many friends in 20s who are almost ready to leave the planet. It's not necessarily age related, but I'm always wondering about that. I have some good friends who have talked about hacking the system to live until they're 150, 200, and have that real belief. But I think also it seems to fit in line with quite a strong fear of death, or a fear of aging, and a fear of that kind of unspoken.
But I think this is a mistake to equalize the words, or to put them on the same level as death and aging, because death can happen at any time. Exactly. And I think the most important thing about death is really, it demands that you say, what is your priority? Is your priority to live now? Is it to open your heart, or is it to postpone it? And if you postpone it, you'll never know whether you'll make it. I mean, to say how many people have died in this pandemic who didn't think they were going to die. And they said, oh, there's only the old people that die. And then you read about all the young people who are dying too. So I think it's very, very important that you say, what do you really want? Where do you really want to go? If you feel, I think one of the things that Nat said, which was very beautiful, she said she experienced herself as being complete. And then you don't search outside. Then you are, if you're complete and you're whole, this is the level that you can meet. And if death reaches you, and it will reach you, this is quite clear, then it is the body that will die, and your spirit will live on, and your young spirit will live on. I don't know how and where and when, but it definitely will. Because really, death is something to do with the separation of this energy that keeps us alive and the body that is the carrier of this energy. And it's not as though you can say, it's like a person sitting in a taxi that's get driven around, my body is my taxi. No, it's not like that, because it's totally interwoven. And I think the breath plays a very central role in that, in the way the two are constantly linked. If you say, I'm going to stop breathing, well, then, that's the end of life. But so from my point of view, I think one of the things is, we should have perspectives for ourselves. And I think one of the perspectives that I have for myself is to say, I'm just bloody nosy. I'm really nosy. Yeah, I'm really interested in what's happening, and I want to know what's happening and where things are going. And I'm so amazed that, you know, I'm 73, so I'm quite amazed that so many young people, you know, sort of listen to meditations by me. And I started with people who were that age when I was in the mall. I started teaching with them, and it's wonderful because they came to me also with the idea that they said, you know, I trust you. I trust you. You have a voice like my grandfather.
You've got a voice like David Attenborough, I trust you.
Yeah, I always thought, you know, these beautiful young ladies, I wish they said, you know, you have a voice, I trust you now. But I realized at that moment I'm a senior, and that is my role. My role is really to help people. And this is the fascinating thing, because the problems and challenges that arise are something that I can react to, and I can share my knowledge or my experience. And if I don't have it, I can say, wow, this is wonderful. We've got a new chapter to look at. So it's not as though, you know, COVID is, for me, is no drama, because it's, you know, if you've ever been on retreat, it's no different. And she got stuck in her bed for half a year. Wow. So you had the biggest retreat of us all.
Retreat.
Yeah,
longest retreat.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the insight led to love. And it led to the fact that you lost your fear. And it led to the fact that you are courageous and you are a model for other young people. And I think that's really wonderful. And I can say is, you know, you think you're young and you can do it, but I'm old and I can do it too. And Chris, you're somewhere in the middle, you know, like you always are. Yeah.
We were saying before he came on the call, we go from the hair at the moment. I've got the hair, and then Chris has got a little bit less, and then Gerald's got none.
Yeah. I wish you'd share a bit with me, Nat.
I'm with you, Gerald. I'm with you.
Oh, sorry. I'll pass it over.
Okay.
I love it. And you know, I said to you before, Gerald, and I really would like this. I think I mentioned to you, Chris, and when we were with Zoran and stuff the other day, is for I Am Sound TV, for the platform as it's kind of building, and I'm putting it together. And I said, I really want to have a series on the elders. I really want to have that. I want to have that kind of conversation happening, because I feel like it's a lack at the moment, and I feel like there's a misunderstanding and a disrespect that is given to people at the moment that are elder and that do have that knowledge. And I feel like, you know, putting together a series on that would be fascinating, because it's, you know, some of the best conversation. I mean, I'm from Yorkshire, not originally, but I've been up here for not long enough time that you say hello to everyone that you walk past, regardless of whether you're on the bus, in the taxi, or walking over the road. And, you know, I walk the dog around the field some mornings, and there's some elderly people on there, and they're just so inquisitive and chatty, and they've got so much knowledge on a dog walk for 40 minutes around a field. And I value that time, and I think it's so precious. But we don't like in London, you don't really say hello, and I just feel these conversations are not had often enough.
Yeah, that's something I'm very passionate about. My father had a stroke when he was 64, and it took the right side of his body, and also his speech. And for an eloquent lecturer from the university who used to love scaling mountains, it took everything from him in many ways. But we used to always say, a bit like Ramdas would say, you know, my dad had been stroked, because actually this very intellectual, very wonderful, kind man went from being this wonderful man of stature, a great folk singer, musician, to completely surrendering to his situation. And so when we would go into the room to see him, he was very lucid, but when we would go into see him in the room, he would lift my arm and he would just kiss me, and kiss my arm all the way up my arm, and then just hold me like my father never held me like that before. And, you know, the beauty of that experience, the touching sort of aspect of that was so beautiful. And just putting this into the context, he had a stroke for 16 years after that, or 17 years. And so we would visit Belfast, and so I would see him for 17 years from London or Ibiza, and fly to see him. And he couldn't speak, he couldn't formulate speech. He could understand me fully, but he could sing his songs that he wrote perfectly. So me and my dad would sing together, and that's how we communicated. And we would just communicate in song. And that went for many, many years. And so one of the reasons why I'm telling you this as well was because I visited him for such a long time in a center for elders. I got to kind of witness for 16 years a real experience of how my father lived and what he was living in and around. And my dad loved the place. He was so well looked after, good old Irish nurses and, really wonderful people who take you like family, But for me, I found it sometimes so challenging to watch this kind of these spaces that elders would live in, that you felt that their wisdom was being wiped away, whether it was from isolation or kind of certain uses of drugs for anxiety or depression, or a lot of sort of pharmaceutical inputs. And I started to really investigate and start talking to everyone in the spaces, and start to really uncover the stories of people that you would otherwise have just maybe never found out, and just the unearthing of people and their stories and their beautiful hearts. And this was so touching. And I swore to myself and my father, which is my next project, is to work to create elder spaces where people can die well and die lucidly as far as they can. And that isn't part of my trajectory over my next 5 years, that I will start creating spaces like that. Because, in truth, we have had so many experiences that are, certainly for myself, when I look into my elderhood, and maybe Gerald, you're a bit further forward than that, but I can sense that you have a timeless sense about you. So I'm not talking about age at all here, I'm talking about mindset. And I think if you have lived, certainly in this time when you have had very beautiful, let's call it wellness experiences, or you understand the benefits of nutrition and, what it means to bathe, what it means for your body, to take care of yourself. I want that to move into elderhood, and I know that for myself. And not having parents anymore in the front line in front of me, I see my own trajectory, and I'm looking at that and how I want that to be. And I don't see much. So then I decided I got to create it. So wow. That's part of my next mantra. So just I think coming back to what you were saying about, giving elders everything that they are worth, and I say they, I don't know who they means even when I say elder. I just know that there is such a neglect, a deep, deep neglect from that space. And I would just add one thing in on that is and it's not, I know the world of pharmaceutical is sometimes very necessary, but, and this is not a conversation about pharmaceutical agendas or conspiracies, but it's really more about the fact that when you inject someone, especially for anxiety, for the first time, when you inject something into their body, that will just take a consistent kind of journey all the way to the end. And that starts to remove your lucidity, your connection to consciousness, and all of those things that start to be eroded slowly. Yeah. And I found that really distressing, because my father chose not to do that. And I watched him stay conscious and connected. And that was his anxiety drug, was to stay with family, to sing, to be in joy. And yet this easy kind of route, the nurses would come in and quite innocently say, "Dad, do you want an injection today?" They would just offer it. And my dad knew that if it was one, it would be the journey. And luckily for him. So I guess what I'm saying really is that somehow I just want to be able to champion elderhood, and I think there's something as part of it, as the heightened journey to the dying process, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think the thing is, you have to.
We've got a background thing. Sorry.
I've got an echo.
You have got an echo. Do you have the show on in the background by any chance? On YouTube at the same time? No. Oh, it's stopped now. So carry on.
Has it stopped?
Yep. Stopped.
Okay. So, do you know the Living Dying Project, Dale Borglum?
No.
That is, I think, one of the central places to get a lot of information. And I contacted him because I wanted to do some meditations by Stephen Levine. And Stephen Levine did a very, very, very beautiful meditation about dying. It's called Letting Go Meditation, just to go back to your words. And the Letting Go meditation that you can find on the livingdying.org website by Stephen Levine, I asked his wife, who's still alive, and I'm very happy about that, whether I could translate it and record it, and I did. And then somebody said, "Oh, I don't want to have the word death. I'd like to have it without the death." So I recorded it in German without the death. But it's very interesting because it has something to do with breathing in and breathing out and finding the role of the breath. And then finally you just breathe out and you leave the heavy body behind you. and you breathe out into this enormous space of consciousness, and you're so free. And then you feel the first breath coming back again, and you come back and you're reborn. So it's basically, you don't have to break a back like Nat did. You can just read Stephen Levine's meditation, and you'll find it really deeply moves you, because you have a feeling that your essence doesn't die. This is why it's called sacred death or sacred life. You are love, and with the love that goes through everything, that is the key. And if you feel incomplete and you start looking, you look outside, but this answer is inside. And therefore, I felt Nat was so wonderful to say, let's talk about sacred death, not just any old death. Let's make it sacred. And this really has something to do with the essence of our life.
It has this. Do you know? For me, it's a realization of the stillness, and the stillness is where the most transformations happened in my life. The silence, the times I've spent in silence, the time understanding that, the space between the words. When I listen to meditations, when I do meditations, once I finish saying something, there's a drop. And the magic bit there, just after you say something in that space, is where the process happens. And that's where people take that in, or they get ready for the next word. But it's this whole process in between, in the silence, that for me made me look at death in a different way as well, in the sense of, there is something beyond the silence, because something always comes out of it. Not everybody knows what that is. I've had my own experiences where I've, and I won't go into it now, but it's a whole other topic, which I mentioned a few times. I've had experiences where I've had people who have died that have come to talk to me, to ask me to pass messages on for people. So I know that is a possibility. I know that exists. I know my messages that I passed on were actually correct, which freaked me out at the time. But it confirmed to me that there's something out there that we don't fully know or understand, but there's something else going on. And I don't fear it in that way. I did at the time, because it's quite an intense process to go through, and I didn't know anybody else who had this sort of gift. At the time I didn't think it was a gift, but it was very kind of scary. But now I look at it, and I'm grateful to having had that experience, and to be able to see that there's something beyond the veil, in that void that we often, we're so scared of going into. And I think the reason why people feel that death is so scary is because death is the unknown for a lot of people, because we don't like to tap in or get used to that death term. We don't want to go into the death. We don't want to go into the darkness. And the more that we're scared of something, the more that we're unwilling to go into the space of the unknown, we will be terrified of it. And I've made it in the last, few years in my life to be able to go into the unknown. And now I do that just every day. It doesn't have to be a big sacred Buddhist meditation. It's the fact that I come on these shows, and all I do is book a person, a date, and a time. I don't know the questions other than the subject. I don't want to, because the more I can go into the unknown while I'm here, the easier it's going to be when it comes to the time. So I try and make sure that as often as possible, I can make those decisions of going into the unknown, because I joke and say, I don't have plans, because God has better ones. And I mean that with every part of my heart and my soul, is that whenever I plan something, it goes tits up. It goes wrong. And I'm like, I need to get out my own way. And since I did that, things start happening. The magic takes place. The people come along. The difference in my life has been huge, because I'm willing to sit in the unknown. And I think it can be quite a beautiful practice, rather than a devastating meditation. Not that that meditation is devastating, by the way, because I've just posted it in the notes. So we can, if anybody wants to listen to that, they can go and check it out. But it's the process that if we can do it often enough while we're alive, I think that's something that can make it so we can get used to something. Have either of you two had that experience where you've kind of just given up and gone, do you know what? I'm getting out of my own way here, and let a project take its shape?
Well, in India, I had a process basically of saying, what am I going to do today? And so I was training myself all the time, and my intuition was growing all the time, so that I could follow my feelings in which direction to go. So this was more like what you were saying. And then a question popped up saying, that's very interesting, but there's something missing in my life, and that's commitment. Because commitment means that you stay in one place and you go in deep. And I think this is what you're doing with your programs. This is your form of commitment. You say, I see myself, this is what I want to do. I'm committing to this program, and I'm going to be totally honest. Whatever happens, I'm going to be honest. And this is the basis of love. So really, you have the commitment and the intuition that you're bringing together in that manner. But I wanted to ask another thing. You just said alongside, oh, by the way, I'm a medium. These spirits come to me and talk through me, and it works. Wow. So tell us a little bit more. What how is this? Is this part of your life? Do they come every night? They come, you cuddle up to a local spirit, or how does it work?
Do you know what? It's very okay. So the first time it happened to me, I went and did a Reiki session for someone, and I told this story last night on last night's show, but I did a Reiki session for someone, and I got messages through, and I've been telepathic for a number of years anyway. When I get really close to an individual, I can become very, very, pick up straight away, and I can read everything, which is quite intrusive at times as well, which I have used in a argumentative way, which is not clever. So if anybody's listening done that, do not do that. But my intuition and my knowing of things has always been quite deep. But this particular time, it really terrified me because it was with an older lady, and she was 62 or 63. She was a tiny little woman, and her husband came through me to her, and she was crying, and she's looking at me going, what do you do? What do you do? And I'm just like, oh, I've kind of started this water company. And she's like, you're not meant to do that. You're meant to do this. My husband wouldn't just come through to anyone. He's a Quaker. He got a message for me. Your hands were over me. They were my husband's hands. And she's giving me all of this information, and I couldn't handle it. I was like, I'm thinking, I've made this little old woman cry. I felt so bad. And when I left that space that I was in, and I came home, and I said to my dad, oh my God, I made this woman cry, and her husband's apparently come through to me, and I don't know what this is. And my dad was really blasé, and I felt like I was a bit unsupported. So I came upstairs, and I sat in the room from here, and I sat down on my bed, and I'm like, and this is why I named the show What the Fuck Was a Spiritual Awakening last night, because this is what happened to me. But I sat on the bed, and I'm like, what the fuck had just happened to me? And as I said it, somebody sat on the side of my bed, and I looked, and I'm like, there's no one there. And I felt the bed go down, the goosebumps on my body, and I'm like, and he just came through to me and just said, don't worry, everything's fine, I'm here, you can take your own time, I want you to write a letter to her for me. I'm her husband. And he introduced himself formally and kind of sat with me until I got my breath, and then asked me to get my iPad and write an email to her. And I did. Wow. And the email was so beautiful, and it's a longer story which I won't go into, but the email was so descriptive. So I forwarded it to her, and she was very grateful. And then it opened up something within me, and I had, for the next 5 days, unfortunately 5 people died within my vicinity, not super close to me, but of people that I knew, and all 5 of them came through me to give messages one day after another. And I couldn't do it. And I at the end of it, I was like, I have to, because what I realized is when they were coming through, they each had their own personality, and they would tell me to write things down, and I would write things down in the way that they spoke. So one of them had a really northern London accent, so I had that kind of writing as it came through, and then another one came through with a different type of accent, and I couldn't see anything, but I'm clairsentient. So clairaudient is where you can hear things, clairvision, clairvoyant when you see, clairsentient is where you know, but you don't know why you just know. So I had this bit of within me thinking, well, I know, but how do I convince someone that I know? How do I make them sure of that? How do I let them know I know, without judging me or accusing me of being crazy or lying? So it was a real confidence thing for me, and I couldn't handle it. So I read a book of some woman, and she said that you can ask the spirits to stop. And I asked them to stop, and I hadn't had it for a long, long time. And then they started coming through. I started working with mushrooms, with magic mushrooms, and things started happening again. And I would say things, and they would just happen within minutes, and I would be like, so I pulled back, because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, and I know that it will come at the right time. But what I wanted to do was, if I'm going to do anything within that world out of pure respect, it's getting out of my own way, and I wasn't very good at it back then. I was always
so if I may give you a tip, my wife was extremely sensitive. And she had all sorts of impressions. She was a Reiki master too. So she had all these ideas, and she had lots of spirits. But the most important thing was that you do grounding work. And you have to be solidly grounded. Now, my wife unfortunately grounded herself by smoking. She said, if I smoke, then I don't have to see the things so exactly, which I found very counterproductive. And but the other way is always grounding. The more you walk outside, your walks that you do in nature are very good for this, the breathing down through your body into the ground. This is an important part, because when you die, the first thing that dissolves is the earth element, and people get shaky and wobbly and things like that. That's why I would always say anything you do towards grounding practice that will put you in the position that you can deal with this. What are your experiences, Chris, with all sorts of spirits and things like that turning up?
There's been a few. So it's an interesting one, because actually just today, a very good friend of mine, she lost her godfather her godfather passed in Paris, and she went there, and she's just there now. And they are Persian, and I think, I'm not quite sure how they define it, but they have a process called a wake process that we have in Ireland. And in Ireland, you have a 3-day process, and it's very public. It's very much, when you can drive in a village and you'll see 100 people queuing to go into someone's house during these 3 days to pay respects and to kind of work through. And of course, that process is based in sort of the deep passing of spirit. And in Ireland, when we were kids, we grew up with wake, and obviously went through that with my mother and my father. But so this sort of connection between the sort of the physical and then going out into the phenomenal. I think, Gerald, that's very good advice in a way, or very good counsel, is always to try and understand things from the body and a sensed feeling that grounds you, rather than necessarily just traveling out and outwards all the time. Sometimes you can't stop that, of course. I've had many journeys myself, and many communications with faraway fields. I'll save it for another show, but for sure, or save it for another conversation. But it's definitely taken me to some extraordinary places and spaces and meeting points in my life. And I think probably also confirms the sort of, there's a sort of, what it really brought me was a kind of, like a kind of seriousness. Is that the word? Yes, it is. Seriousness around death, actually, to some degree. That there is some aspect of this which had a humor to it as well. Somehow there was a different kind of conversation around it that helped free me up. And so those experiences have always helped me free up around this idea that you're just a body and a mind, and you're going to head off somewhere else. So those experiences really helped me through kind of a deeper layer of understanding death, actually. It's been really poignant.
There's something that I found for me that one of the other reasons it stopped me was because I didn't want to be unrelatable. Like I was involved with a guy at the time, and I was extremely, let's just call it witchy, because that was the best way to describe me at the time. Not in a negative sense. I don't think there's the witchy negative thing needs to even be a thing. There was a lot of times where I would know an awful lot of information, and it was flooding through. When I say information, it's not just like, oh, I know what you're thinking. Mine was like, I was getting codes, or I was getting dates and times, and I was piecing it together, but they would be for him and they wouldn't be for me. And I have this a lot with people, where they'll be working on something major, and I'll be with them for 20 minutes, and I'll be like, boom, oh, you need this, or you need to see this link. And it's quite overwhelming for some people. And I also had a problem at the time. I didn't really know much about keeping my mouth shut. I'd always just talk as it came through. So I was like, boom, 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 which is, if you're trying to create intimacy with someone when I've constantly got my gob open, it's not really the thing to do. And I feel like I was a little bit too much.
Right. Well, I think it comes back to, coming back to being in, if you're really, channeling this work in any form to be in service for others, there's also just allowing the kind of the good practice and good I guess just good practice for others, so quite often you'll meet people who are able to kind of see things. I know of myself, my intuitions are really heightened. I work with people and clients most days, I could easily tell them what I see. and yet at that point it's really not about me. And there's always that sort of layer of at what point does this become relevant or not? And there's always a deep listening in that around this kind of information that moves through you. It's not really necessarily about transmitting information. It's really about is it service? Is it for service? You know, and if it isn't, then it's just an experience. You know?
Yeah. That's fascinating, because I think deep listening also needs dialogue. Because you see, I basically believe that when you love a person, you have two people standing up for themselves and they resonate. And I think this resonating is dialogue. And therefore, if you have all this intuition, it's very interesting to say, I have listened deeply, I have understood it, but the question is, when are you going to resonate? And when are you going to communicate? Because really, you get these messages because they can really inspire people. And they can take them to the next step, and they can save them a lot of time and a lot of worry and a lot of other things. And therefore, to say, I'm going to sit on it and I'm just going to be silent, and I don't know. I would say you can't fix a rule. I think anybody who's highly intuitive runs through Nat's problem of talking too much. That's quite clear. But then comes a point when you can say, we really want a dialogue. We really want to resonate with one another. And that changes the whole thing.
Absolutely.
I get I get a knowing. And the knowing isn't necessarily in words. It's just an intense feeling. And then what I've become used to, and I think what Chris is saying is lovely, obviously having that space and that time and sitting and making sure that whatever's coming through me is coming through me in the right way, and it's coming from the right place. So I'm not getting in the way of that information, which is the silence, which sitting in, which is more important. But I think that I've now, and I know it now, whereas before I used to think, my English teacher said to me when I was younger, you're either going to be famous for talking or in a hell of a lot of trouble. And I get it now, but I can articulate things in a way that other people are in awe of. And I never used to let that flow, because I used to think, oh my God, am I talking too much? So I'd stop or I'd say something else. Right. Now I trust myself to bring through what I'm saying, because sometimes I will open my mouth even after the deepest meditation, I will open my mouth and I will finish and I have no idea what I've said or why, and people are crying, and I'm now comfortable with the cries because I know that they obviously land. But before I was really uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure what to do. But I think now it's I know how to articulate it now, whereas before I didn't, and I would just bitch slap this comment and this bit of truth, and no one wants that. No one wants you to deliver their truth, the bitch slap. It's more like, can we have it on a cushion, please? Can we have it at the right time and in the right way? But now I can do that. But that's taken confidence. And also knowing that I do know things. It doesn't mean I've got a big head or I'm arrogant. It just means today I know, tomorrow I might not. I wish I knew the lottery numbers sometimes, but I don't. Sometimes it's really random information. But it's just having that confidence, I think, now, whereas I didn't have that before. But we all grow and learn, don't we? So just before you guys depart, and I loved this conversation, I really valued it, and a couple of others with the elder conversations, and Chris, some of your stories, I'd love to get on air sometimes and just go down the rabbit hole with you of where you've been in your interstellar adventures. I think would be.
Don't forget to send me a link. I'd like to listen in.
Yeah, you can join in on that one, Gerald. We can join in on that one. But in terms of, for anybody out there that is going through a process, either with themselves and their time is coming, or if they have someone dear to them, or even if it is a situationship that needs to die, like a relationship is, it's not really working, it's more of a situationship and it's not serving you anymore. That's also a transformational process. Could I kind of have 2 or 3 things from you that you would highly recommend someone to sit with and process during this time? Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, quite often it comes to me, people are starting to go into a dying process, or their family or family member or friend or lover, partner. The first thing I'd always say is in that process is to really deeply listen in, to connect with your soul carrier through this process. And quite often that can be you. And if it isn't, to really understand and know who that person might be. And it may not always be your beloved. And the reason why it may not be your beloved is because your beloved or your family and you have a contract of love that holds you together in life. And quite often it is very, very difficult to go through a dying process freely, because family will always be there. Now, they'll be there to guide you, but when you are going in through that process, your want and love for them keeps you coming back and back. And dying is dying in the body is a challenging process. And, you know, I wouldn't want to get too transcendent about it all and too in the love, because it's actually very messy. Dying is messy. It's like it's dying and birth. You know, they're the similar worlds. It's physically a messy job. So the reason why I'm saying that is that quite often, I would say, you know, I've been with families, and of course, families are your number one priority to be with you. But the soul carrier is not always the person you might expect to be. So quite often it can be the doula or the nurse or someone who can be gentle in stillness with you along that process. Yeah. It's a very curious one, and it's been something that I've noticed along the way. And luckily for me, my father chose me and my sister to go through that dying process with him. But it was a deep listening beyond our constellation as a family. It was a very, very deep listening. And had I have not had that calling, I would have offered that to someone to do that with him, because I would have caused him too much pain or too much alertness in the body. So that's one I think that is very interesting that I've definitely been exploring over time with people. Maybe jump over to Gerald and come back to me. I can think of a few others, because I'm just going into that process again.
Yeah, you're wonderful, Chris. You're very, very wonderful the way you talk about it. My experience of dying is, of course, on the one level, it is, as you say, a messy process. On the other side, if you use the art of dying as it's practiced in Tibetan Buddhism, then you have a clear idea of how energies are flowing in the body. You know when the skin gets thin and papery. You know when the people have this incredible thirst and feel that they're being burnt from the inside. And because you have followed a process beforehand, you can recognize it when you're confronted with it. And this is enormously comforting, because you don't have to worry. You know, oh, yes, this is where I can do this. This is how I can do that. And they're wonderful people. If you take Joan Halifax, for instance, in America, she's a Buddhist nun, and she's recorded the process of dying in a wonderful way, and she gives introduction to this. And there are other people in the field. If you just look at that, or the people around her, or the Living and Dying Project, they will all give you introductions to the process of how dying really happens in the body, and how the spirit. This is all because we're energy beings, and the energy being, how it frees itself and moves and leaves the body. This is something that everybody can really meet up with. And I think this is, from my point of view, you approached it from a very human point of view, and I approached it more from a theoretical point of view, but you need both. And you need to talk to people, and you need friends, and you make friends. And I think it's the same as what you're saying. It might be the nurse, it might be the people that you walk your dog with on the field who will help you. You need help and support in these matters.
Yeah, I love that. You never know who it's going to be until the time happens, and it's just allowing that person to show up. Not have any resistances to anybody that you want it to be, and it's not them. It's, you know, you can't ask everyone to go through that journey with you in that way, and it might not be part of their path.
Exactly.
So it's definitely quite a big ask. But yeah, I want to thank you so much for coming on today to talk about this. And you know, I actually thought I'd cry, because I cry on everything. I don't know why. I cry all the time on these shows, which is absolutely fine. But this is the only one I haven't cried on, and I think that's.
Do you want to cry? Should we make you cry? Should we make you cry?
I'm done crying. I cry all the time. I'm literally behind.
No, you want to be grounded. You don't want to cry. You cried enough. You're brilliant, Nat. You're absolutely brilliant. And if you say, I had this experience on the floor where I melted into love and the way it was, that is the most important thing in life. And you've told us about it. Well, to heck with the tears. They're over. You're grounded, and you're going to channel, and you're going to move the world. I'm so happy to have met you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Chris, it's been wonderful meeting you. I'm really impressed. And please involve me so I can listen in.
Of course, please let's stay in touch. I'm looking forward to hearing all of our voices in and around the world at some point.
I know,
that sounds
right?
beautiful. We're transmitting vibrational fields. I love that.
We're doing that.
We're doing that. Well, for everyone else that's out there, thank you so much for joining us today as well. Again, this is another show. I think this is like my 50th show, if I remember rightly, or something like that. Yeah, I know, it's quite a lot. It's crazy, but I'm loving doing it. And I came up with a tagline the other day for I Am Sound TV. So I'm calling it I Am Sound, and it's TV for the soul. That's going to be my tagline. So it's all about stuff that will move you from the inside out. And these conversations will keep coming. I'm currently only doing 3 days a week now because I've decided to not go toe for toe with Boris. I've decided that was a bad idea, and I'm changing it. So I'm doing 3 days a week, and it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays for now. And the rest of the time I'm spending learning more, going more and more into the world of crypto, which is a whole other show and a whole other world, which I'm really enjoying. But thank you so much for everyone. You guys stay there, but everybody else at home, I will see you next week. And that is, next Tuesday. I'm not sure what's happening, but I will put that out there at some point when I can get around to doing my admin. And thank you for joining me. And stay tuned. There's loads more to come. And if you haven't already downloaded the app, by the way, please go and do that. Go I Am Sound in the App Store. You can get it from your Google Play Store or the App Store. You can download our radio station, and it's got loads of chilled out kind of spiritual ceremonial music on there. It's got a little bit of Ibiza vibe to it as well, but I'm adding more and more of the magic, and if there's no track on there unless it gives me goosebumps. So you have my word, you will enjoy it. But for now, we'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you.